Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on as we continue our look into the young players and prospects on every NBA team. We're going to run through the Atlantic Division this time around. That's going to be Brooklyn, Toronto, Boston, Atlanta, or who else am I missing here? Philadelphia, New York and Philadelphia. New York's in there. Yeah, you know, we're going to talk about those teams, and we're also going to talk at the top about the Kawhi Leonard trade and kind of get Cole's thoughts on it. I've written about it extensively. You've seen my thoughts on it in all likelihood, but I want to get Cole's thoughts because it's at least very interesting insofar as all three of the top teams in this division, Toronto, Boston, and Philadelphia, they at least kick the tires on making this deal. So it's interesting in the way that it shifts the balance of power potentially within this division.
Yeah, I mean, the Kawhi deal was fascinating on multiple fronts, but I love the deal for Toronto as far as I thought it was a home run risk-reward play. I mean, you have a chance to get a top 5 player. If Kawhi is healthy and cooperative and reports to camp, I think he is. Otherwise, he'll get fined and he'll report to games, so I'm not concerned about that overall. But just the dynamic that he adds. Toronto was the number 1 team in the East last year, and we saw what LeBron did to them in the playoffs. I think it was just kind of time to blow it up a little bit. Not necessarily full-fledged, but you couldn't really run the same team back, even with LeBron out of the conference, in my opinion. So getting Kawhi, who at his apex is the best perimeter defender in the league, and again can provide plus offensive value with his shooting acumen. People forget, like 2016, he was one of the 3 or 4 best players in the league. Like, he took huge leaps as far as his self-creation out of the post on pull-up shots. I thought the risk-reward play, giving up DeRozan long-term, if it doesn't work out, let's say Kawhi leaves after this season. The worst thing is you let DeRozan go without potentially getting a better asset long-term, but you also get to kind of hit the button on the rebuild then. But as far as before the rebuild, I think you optimize Kyle Lowry already on the roster. You have really interesting infrastructure on that team as far as perimeter defense acumen. You kept OG Anunoby in the deal. You didn't include him, so I thought it was a home run swing.
Yeah, you know, I agree. I thought that it was definitely a home run swing. Whether or not it ends up going over the fence is another question entirely, right? It's just going to be very interesting to watch, and so much of it comes down to a health situation that we don't have all of the information on with Kawhi Leonard. And to be honest, like, I'm not entirely sure Toronto has all of the information, but I think it goes to show how much this team had the benefit of being able to go out and do a big splash move like this, because they'd won at least 48 games over each of the last 5 years, including 59 a year ago. But their fan base, I feel like, didn't really have the confidence that would typically come along with such a team because of the lack of playoff success. And whenever that's the case, I feel like you have a strange amount of cover almost as a front office to then go out and try and just make a crazy splash and see what happens.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of latitude here to make a move like this, with it being understandable by their fan base. I still think Musa would have done it anyway. That just seems like the kind of GM that he is. I think just overall, the trade from a process standpoint, you can understand why they made a decision. That's what we have to evaluate it based on. I evaluate a lot of things based on process, even though it is ultimately a results-based league. It's going to be remembered by if Kawhi does re-sign there long-term. But as far as just the input, what we can control at the juncture, it made a ton of sense for them, because I really do feel like this is the kind of move that could have elevated them over the top when you potentially have the best player in the conference on your team.
Yeah, and you know, if he's healthy, I don't know, they're probably not the favorite, but I think that they're clearly second behind Boston, right?
I would rank them second right now, but I absolutely would not be surprised. Like, it's really close with them in Boston. Philadelphia, to me, is a little bit behind. We'll kind of get into how they match up. What makes this talk so interesting to me is it incorporates prospects as well, which we'll get into. But yeah, it's really, really close between Boston and Toronto. I do feel like Toronto actually matches up with Boston the best of any team in the conference.
I think I agree, and I think that Toronto in a potential series with Golden State would match up in an interesting way, because they do have Kawhi Leonard and OG Anunoby and Danny Green that they can throw out there as high-level defenders who can actually match up with the strange mobility and length and scoring acumen and everything that is the Golden State Warriors. So you throw in Kyle Lowry, who can, hopefully just guard Stephen Curry for 35 minutes a night at a high level. You throw in DeLon Wright and Fred VanVleet, both of whom are pesky, if very, very different defenders. It's just a fascinating team now that has all sorts of depth, but also has the star power at the top that they were missing. They had that vacuum at the top, despite the fact that DeMar DeRozan is now a 2-time All-NBA player. I don't think anyone really thinks of him as like a top 10 player in the league. Most people think of him more as like a top 25 player in the league. Kyle Lowry, at this stage of his career, probably more of like a top 25 to 30 player in the league. So getting that top 5 guy, if Kawhi Leonard is healthy, that really could be the move that pushes them over the top to where they want to go.
And really, there's a big divide even between the top 5 guy and the top 10 guy in the league. Like the escalators, it goes down significantly. It's not just, a small drop off. Like if you go, even Kawhi Leonard healthy to Paul George is a big drop-off in my opinion. So if you're going from 5 to DeRozan, who I agree with you, probably in the regular season was a top 30, top 25 guy. He did not play like that in the playoffs, though. That's the key. Against the Cavs, he was not that player. So getting that level of star power, and what we always have talked about with the Raptors is they have a lot of depth that's valuable in the playoffs. They have playoff depth because they have the wings, they have the switchability, they have the defense. You go down the roster, Fred VanVleet, they got C.J. Miles, Dalen Wright, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam can be a switchable 5. I think some of the lineups that he can unlock for them is going to be really fascinating. And getting Danny Green in this deal was huge. I didn't mention that from the off, but I think that he's not the same player he was 3 years ago, but I still think he's a reliable switch guy, good team defender. He can make a shot. You don't find many of those guys that bring that skill package. So to me, they have a really fascinating roster overall that just bodes well to switch a lot in the playoffs, can be potentially really pesky defensively, and they also have 2 offensive players that can get their own shot. It's going to come down to how good Kawhi Leonard is offensively, how good Kyle Lowry is, because if they can really generate the offense, I think the defense is going to take care of itself here.
Yeah, and there's also the opportunity cost aspect of this. So San Antonio obviously wanted to stay good. That's why they end up taking DeMar DeRozan over the massive amount of picks that Boston was offering, apparently, or over the Dario Saric and Robert Covington and like young players and picks package that Philadelphia wanted to offer. Do we think that these teams should have offered more to try and make that finals run, or do we think that they offered what they could? They offered reasonable amounts. It's just that Toronto ended up making the best offer.
It's so tough because in a vacuum, I do think the team should have offered more. When you get a chance to land a top 5 player, potentially, you have to take it, because this is the whole point of all of this, is to get a player like that. So it's easier for me to sit here and say that, though, without having the intel. Maybe these teams knew a little bit more, or maybe they knew far too little about Kawhi's situation. It's hard to surrender a Markelle Fultz in that trade. I get that. It's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow if Kawhi leaves after a year. That looks bad, but I think the process of that decision makes a lot of sense. The same with Boston. Maybe Boston to a lesser extent just because they already have the wing infrastructure, but I would have, of all these teams, even the Lakers, for example, I would have tried to trade for Kawhi. I think a bird in hand in the situation. If you can just get him in your building, you risk it, because this risk is what this whole process is about. It's getting a player like this who can actually contribute to a title team.
At some point, we'll talk about the Lakers, not on this podcast, but I actually like what the Lakers are doing. I'll say that. Let's move forward. Let's talk about prospects. Prospects are what make this podcast go. They're our favorite thing in the world. We're going to go on ahead and talk about the Atlantic Division prospects here. Let's start with Boston. They have the most interesting group of prospects, arguably in the NBA, right?
They're definitely up there.
Depending on how you define Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, I would probably say that this group is right around that group. Maybe not necessarily if you include Embiid, but if you don't include Embiid, who's now on his massive extension, I'd say that this is a fun group of prospects.
The most fun part about this division is that they're all actually playing, well, most of them playing pivotal roles at a playoff level already, like Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Embiid, Simmons, Kristaps potentially, OG Anunoby for the Raptors. All these guys have a role. They're actually contributing to winning, which makes it that much more fun to discuss.
Yeah, Boston right now has 3 legit quality NBA starters who are on rookie scale contracts. That is crazy pants to me. Jayson Tatum is 19 years old and is dominant offensively, at least on an efficiency basis. Jaylen Brown is an awesome 2-way player at 20 years old. Terry Rozier, I think, is a legit NBA starter now. He is better than the Dennis Schroeder line, right? He can shoot off the dribble a little bit. He can defend at a higher level. He is genuinely an actual good point guard in the NBA, and now he's going to be coming off the bench and playing like 23 minutes a night. It's crazy.
The team is ridiculously deep, not just in their top-level talent, because they have kind of three separate timelines on this roster. They have Horford and kind of maybe Hayward and Kyrie, the second tier. And the third tier is a bunch of these young guys like Tatum and Brown. And they're able to mix and match all of these guys into one holistic team that just is one of the best teams we've seen in the modern game as far as tailor-made for it, with all these playmaking wings, throwing Gordon Hayward, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown. You have a playmaking center in Al Horford. You have Kyrie Irving, who's the number one point guard. Terry Rozier is like their sixth man. Some of the other interesting prospects, potentially like a Robert Williams, Shemi Ojeleye. Very deep team, but also very stacked at the top. Just rare to see.
Yeah, like the Brooklyn deal really kind of threw the balance off whack for this team.
Good God,
like in the best way for them. Just a ridiculous embarrassment of riches in terms of cost control and in terms of cap space for the Celtics that they were able to utilize in back-to-back summers for Al Horford and for Gordon Hayward. Let's go on ahead and talk about Jayson Tatum first, though. I think he is probably one of the 5 best prospects in the NBA right now, right?
Yeah, so for context here, I had Tatum's the first guy in tier 1 for me. So we did the prospect podcast last time about the Central Division, and not including Giannis because he didn't meet the criteria. I didn't have anybody in that tier 1. So Wendell Carter was the top guy, and he was in tier 2 with Larry Markkinen. Jayson Tatum is in tier 1 for me. I think that he has proven his rookie year that he can be a contributor to winning. He's a playmaking wing who defends, and he hits shots. He's a high-level shooter at his baseline. So if you can defend and you can shoot the ball in the modern game and you're a wing, if you can play both sides of the floor, that's just insanely valuable.
He averaged 18.5 points on a 58% true shooting percentage in the playoffs while playing good defense. Like,
it's nuts.
For a 19-year-old to do that is, I think he might have been 20 in the playoffs now that I think about it, but like he was like right around that age. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. He is so special. He can create his own shot. He obviously can really, really shoot it from distance now. The jump shot looks great in terms of the way it has developed over the course of the last 2 years. Just an incredibly hard worker, but also a smart worker, having worked with Drew Hanlon quite a bit over the course of the last 5 years, I think it is, something like that. Just an unbelievable talent, in my opinion, and one that I would be shocked if he was not just a multi-time All-Star now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have no kind of rejection of any of those thoughts. He's earned it, man. The fact that he was what he did his rookie year, honestly, and in the playoffs especially, where you could argue at times he was the Celtics' best player on a conference finals team. Yep. That is unprecedented stuff. I mean, for the bottom line, 19, 20-year-old, you could even say 22, 23-year-old prospect, that just doesn't happen. So he deserves all the credit in the world for that. And I think he can continue to get better. I'm not of the opinion that he's closer to his ceiling because he's more polished. I think there are still refinements he can make in his game as a finisher, using length extension finishes. Finishing's always kind of been his bugaboo on the offensive end. He's just not that explosive, but I think he can figure some of that stuff out over time. We'll see if he can improve as a passer. But his role at Boston is basically an elite level Otto Porter role, and I think he can expand on that. There's more to his game than we haven't seen. You saw a little bit of the self-creation stuff in the playoffs. He can get his own shot off the bounce. So I don't think his upside is anywhere near tapped as far as that goes. I think there's still more to come here.
Nowhere even close, in my opinion, to having tapped his full upside yet. He is the sky, I think, is the limit. The ceiling is the roof for Jayson Tatum. This dude is going to be a star in the NBA, I think. Jaylen Brown is a guy, though, that I think everyone agrees on Jayson Tatum being a star in the NBA. But Jaylen Brown is one where you'll get a little bit more divisive opinion because some people don't totally trust the jump shot. Some people aren't super sure about the creativity for others. I do think he's going to be, again, maybe make a few All-Star games, a couple of All-Star games. Not quite on the level of Jayson Tatum, but I would take Jaylen Brown over both Wendell Carter and Larry Markkinen, for instance, if we're talking about comparing him to the Central Division. Realistically, given Kristaps Porzingis' injury history, Jaylen Brown's pretty close to Kristaps, I think. if Kristaps didn't have the injury history, he'd be way ahead. But like that to me is kind of what we're talking about with Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, he was the hardest one. He was right on the precipice. So I didn't have him in tier 1 with Tatum. I had him just behind in tier 2. So in the same tier as guys like Wendell Carter, Lauri Markkanen, I would take him over Markkanen. Wendell, that's really tough. I have to see Wendell play at the pro level before I make that statement overall because, I mean, Brown has proven it. I do think that his game, I think he's a little bit more limited than Tatum in his upside because I just never see the high-level feel coming to him. But his role and his skill set, how he contributes to winning in the modern game, being ultra-switchable, and his shot, I am kind of actually buying a little bit. I'm buying the confidence improvement, the mechanical improvement. It looks fine. That dude's hitting pull-up threes. He's hitting shots off screens. I never saw that at the lower level. He's refined his mechanics, I think, to an extent. And again, the confidence is huge for me. So his role in the modern game, you can make a legitimate argument that he's in the same tier as like a Porzingis type with the injuries. To me, he's just a notch down, but again, in like the sub-elite tier of prospects.
Yeah, and like, I mean, if you're making me bet in a vacuum on one player, Jaylen Brown or Kristaps Porzingis, I would still probably take Kristaps. But like, to me, that's kind of the area you're talking about with Jaylen Brown. He's a guy who averaged 15 points a night, 5 rebounds, really, really high-level defender, as you mentioned. And he's doing this, again, at 21 years old. Like, this stuff is not normal for these rookies. This stuff is not average when these guys do this. Like, it is rare to see players have this much success. He averaged 18 points a game in the playoffs on a 56% true shooting percentage and played better defense than Jayson Tatum did. Like, really, really gifted player. Probably not quite as good as Jayson Tatum. That's fair. But he is an excellent basketball player who deserves his props.
Oh, absolutely right. And I think, again, what Boston is doing and how Jaylen Brown translates to the modern game is perfect. Like being a hyper switchable wing who could also play make, and not really for others, but he can dribble and he can get to the rim. And we saw that again. Not a lot of 3-and-D kind of wings can do that stuff. They're not the level of athlete that Brown getting to the rack. That was always his strength in college, was his ability to get to the rim, draw fouls. I do think a little bit of divisiveness, honestly, with Jaylen is the free throw percentage. Is people not buying into the shots because he's still, for his career, he's a 65.8% free throw shooter. And I just don't know if that really is the same as spot-up threes. Like, I just think it's kind of a different animal in this one respect because he has shown the confidence and the consistency. Like, this guy's up to 38% three-point shooting for his career now. Like, that's legit. I mean, for the kind of player that he is, who, again, brings ancillary dribbling, ability to get to the rim, and, like, ultra-switch D, that's a valuable player. And I think in the modern game especially, this is exactly what you want in a wing, unless you can get just a little bit more creation for others and a little bit more efficiency as a self-creator. But the role he's playing, he doesn't need to do those things. He's basically just playing within the scheme of their offense, playing it at a really, really high level.
Yeah, I mean, he shot 39% from three on over 400 threes whenever you account for the playoffs as well. I just kind of think he's a good shooter at this stage. Like, I think from the three-point range from the corners, he's getting there above the break. He's just a good shooter now, I think. Like, just straight up, he can shoot. And then you throw in the ability to finish above the basket. The key for me really is the passing. Like, he needs to be able to make plays for his teammates. He needs to be able to make plays for others around him whenever he doesn't have a secondary option, because I think that's where he gets in trouble right now. And that's going to be where his next step of growth is. He needs to become a guy that makes better decisions every single time out, as opposed to being a guy that kind of gets iffy with some stuff and doesn't make plays for others, and is mostly just like a play finisher as opposed to a play driver of play in general.
And that's the part I'm most dubious of. I'm not sure if that ever comes around for him, because I've just never seen, even defensively, he's a great defender because he can compensate for a lot of the mistakes he does just by being like a 95th percentile athlete or higher in the NBA. So he can wipe away a lot of his mistakes. But again, both sides of the floor, I've never seen the vision as a passer, but that's not the role he's asked to play. So that's another part that goes into this calculus, is he's not being asked to kind of create like some other wings are doing. He's playing. This is what Boston does better than basically any other team in the league, is they put guys in positions to succeed. They give them roles and they maximize them and they optimize them. This is what Jaylen's doing. That's not to discredit him as far as can he play outside that sphere, but he's basically optimizing the role he's given, and you can't really ask anything else from a 21-year-old prospect. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, these guys are insane. They are top of the top. Terry Rozier, though, is very, very good at basketball. He's very, very good. Again, to like kind of put him into context with kind of the rest of the players we've evaluated so far. Like, am I crazy to say like he's kind of on the level of like a Miles Turner-ish guy, like very clear starter in the NBA?
I have him in that same general tier. Honestly, I think it's very defensible at this juncture because he defends. Against LeBron, it's harder, but against everybody else, it's more palatable. And he's made improvements to his offensive game. It's kind of, this is the part that makes it kind of an embarrassment of riches, that you can have like a top 25 conservatively point guard in the league that's your backup. And he could be a starter on a lot of teams in this league. Like, you put him into the Phoenix Suns, you can go on the list. Like, he's a legit, I think, I'm not sure if he's like a primary initiator in a title team, but for the kind of role he plays, he at least defends, and he's ultra athletic. The improvements he's made to his game, I definitely think he's a quality starter in the league. From
the end of January onward, Rozier averaged 15.1 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and only 1.4 turnovers per game in 30 minutes a night while shooting 41% from three, plus playing good defense, as you mentioned. Like, that's really good. That's really, really good. Kind of a strange dude in general, kind of a marches to the beat of his own drum kind of guy, but that's fine. He is a legit like difference maker for them in just about every way. And, you know, he's someone where I do wonder a little bit about the 3-point shooting. It fell off in the playoffs some. Only shot 35% on 8 3-point attempts a game in the playoffs, but averaged 16.5 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists. Did it on like just slightly under average true shooting percentage. Good player. Like, probably not an all-star at some point, but a good player.
And I think this, again, fits the trend of if you can defend and you can shoot the ball, you're going to find a role. Like, I don't think Rozier is like the purest point guard by any means. Like, it's worth noting that his finishing around the rim in the regular season, he was in the third percentile, 36.3% around the basket. Take that for what it's worth. I'm not sure if he's like a spread pick and roll kind of decision maker. You want him in that role, but Boston doesn't play that way. You know, with all the way that the league is trending as far as a lot of these motion type schemes, he fits that because he can shoot the ball off the catch. He can create definitely when he definitely has creation acumen in pick and roll. Like, he can get to his spots. He's super athletic. So a guy like that just has more value in the modern game, and that just goes to like prioritizing certain skill sets and what's more valuable and what's not, and putting guys again in the best situation to succeed. If Terry Rozier is in the Dennis Schroeder mold in Atlanta, is he the same player? Probably not, but that's what makes Boston great.
Next two guys I've got here, Robert Williams and Semi Ojeleye, two very different players. Semi Ojeleye is already established as a rotation player for an NBA team. To me, a very, very good basketball player. Someone that I want on my team 100% of the time.
Yeah, I'm with that. I have him a notch below, actually, Robert Williams and Terry Rozier, just because I don't really buy the upside. I'm not sure if I buy the shooting fully, and he doesn't really do anything else offensively. He's not shooting the ball. He's not getting to the rim. He's not creating for others. He's not a great ball handler. So I'm a little bit more dubious on his upside, but I do think he's an NBA player for sure, and he's already returned value on his contract like we talked about. He defended LeBron last playoffs. Giannis, that's exactly what he was drafted for.
Yeah, I mean, he's a beast. He can play... He can guard twos, but he can also guard fours. You can even play him as like a weird small ball center. Like, he's that strong to where I think you could do that as long as you have a good rebounder at the 3 and the 4. Just a very fungible player that I think every team would love to have off the bench if he can continue to develop as a shooter.
Yeah, I mean, he has a clear role, especially, again, against certain kinds of players. He's a nice ace to have in the hole as far as bringing in a guy who's that big and can move like he can laterally. There's just not a lot of guys built like him. So I definitely get the allure overall. I'm just not sold on the upside to the level I am of like a Rozier as like a quality starter or like a Robert Williams. So if he gets it together mentally, I think that Williams can actually be a starting caliber player and like maybe an above average center in the league. Yeah,
like I would have Ojeleye and Williams in a tier below Terry Rozier, just because Robert Williams... oh boy.
And it's fair. It's fair, man. I don't have a ton of confidence. If he wasn't in Boston, I would have a lot more reservation right now.
Yeah. We'll see. Super athletic, very good shot blocker, very good rim runner. We'll see.
Go to practice. Wake up on time, dude. Like it's yeah, he has talent, man. Especially in the modern game, a switch guy with the length to really guard, rim runner. His passing is underrated. I think that'll come out in Boston's scheme over time. Great situation for him. If he fails here, it's on him. It's not on the situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Guerschon Yabusele is a player that exists. He is known more for the ass herd round the world than for actually being able to play basketball. I think that he would have more success trying out for the NFL. That's my take.
I know. That was we had this discussion on one of the previous podcasts. I thought it was fantastic. He's in my fifth tier, the fringe tier with Jabari, Bird. Bird is kind of intriguing overall, but yeah, Yabusele, not super high on him. Actually, Boston has one player from each tier in my rankings here, so that kind of makes it an interesting kind of wide spectrum, and now we're getting to the lower end.
Yeah, Jabari, Bird, I think, is more interesting to me than Yabusele. I agree. That's my take. I think realistically, if I was Boston, I would probably decline Yabusele's option.
And you could very easily see them doing that.
Third-year option, I think I would decline it. Like if it meant keeping him or Jabari Bird, I might cut Yabusele. Having said that, I understand that Yabusele is apparently just like a great teammate who they love having around because he's fun and enjoyable, but I'm not sure you're ever going to get much value out of that.
Yeah, and on that roster, honestly, like they probably don't need the 14th and 15th guys to play because they're so damn deep. I mean, they legit go like 10, 11 deep in quality NBA players. So maybe that's what they're looking for, is a guy who can, push guys in practice, is a good teammate. Like that matters too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the shot with Yabusele. I don't like he's explosive whenever he can get his momentum going, but I think it's harder for him to get his momentum going because he's so big. Defensively, like he's a 5. It's 6'7". He doesn't move his feet like Ojeleye does. Ojeleye moves his feet as well as Ojeleye moves his feet at 250 pounds or 245 pounds, whatever he is, better than like 90% of guys that size. Yabusele is like an average 260 pound guy, like in terms of mobility. I don't get it. I had him at like 35 on my draft board going into the draft. That pick doesn't get talked about as much as the Papagiannis pick because the Papagiannis pick was worse because I think Papagiannis is worse than he is, but like it's close. It's real close.
Yeah, and it doesn't get talked about because you look at the rest of Boston's draft picks and they overshadow the hell out of it. And like Sacramento Kings, they can't really say the same unless Marvin Bagley really hits or De'Aaron Fox. So yeah, I get from that vantage point, but I very much agree with you. I didn't get it at the time either, but Danny Ainge loves getting these build guys, man, like Semi Ojeleye, Yabusele. These are like the high muscle guys, and see if they can coach them up and get them playing within the scheme.
Marcus Smart also qualifies. Love it. Let's go crazy with muscles. Let's move on to Brooklyn. Brooklyn has a fascinating team of young players. D'Angelo Russell, I think, is where you have to start. Where are you on D'Angelo Russell? If you had to pick one of him or Terry Rozier, who would you pick?
Where I am specifically as far as location, I'm on a life raft off the shore, just kind of treading water this season. Going to see how he progresses, but I'm starting to get a little dubious with him. It's really tough with Rozier because he's so proven. He plays defense. So I think at this juncture, you might have to take Rozier, even though I do think D'Angelo has maybe a higher offensive upside. But he's someone who, again, we talked about this a little bit with Denzel Valentine as far as his vision, and D'Angelo is more skilled and all that stuff. But like his decision making is just, it's not there. It hasn't been there in his career thus far in the NBA. Like he doesn't make good reads. He's turnover prone. It's just never really come together for him in the way that I thought it would. And I'm starting to get a little nervous. That's just who he is as a player. He's a guy who made a lot of flash plays at Ohio State. He clearly has vision. He has some anticipation, but it just that the mental component of his game just isn't there to the level it needs to be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, just the turnover rate keeps going up. Like he had a 17% turnover rate this year. The true shooting percentage actually dropped this year down to 50.0 or 50.9%. The free throw rate dropped to a career low at 19.5%. Like this is all with a usage rate that was higher too. Like I don't know what to do with him. because the talent level is so clearly there. The flash plays are always there and they always will be there, but the decision making is poor. And then you have to throw in the injury history too. I mean, like, the injury history is a serious question mark. Like, he cannot stay healthy with his knees.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how his contract situation plays out. Very curious to see if the Nets even entertain extension offers before the deadline here, or they just let it run its course. But also another point with D'Angelo's game is that he's not really a 3-level scorer. And that's something that really doesn't get talked about enough. Like, he's more of a 2-level scorer. So when you bet on him, you were always betting on the pull-up, which honestly was a pretty safe bet in my opinion. Like, he came into the league, and I was pretty confident in that pull-up three. He took a lot of those at Ohio State. He had the ability to keep guys in jail and shoot pull-up mid-range shots. The balance stuff has taken longer to translate, but he's not a guy who gets to the rim and finishes. He relies on runners. He's not good around the rim as far as 33rd percentile last year, and that's always been an indictment on his game. He just doesn't have the best legs as far as explosiveness. He's more of a craft guy, but I'm not sure if he's crafty enough or physical enough to ever be that guy. And if the decision-making isn't there, like, if he's going to make those skip-pass reads and he's going to time them well, he can be kind of a straight, I mean, he'll never be utilized as James Harden type, but he can be serviceable in pick and roll for sure. Like, he's capable. I don't know if he can make the right-handed pass. That's another something that limits his game. Is mostly he's best when he pick and roll coming to his left, so he can really make that left skip. But overall, I think his game was just a little bit more limited than I gave him credit for, and I let the highlight plays at Ohio State were so alluring. I think I let that overshadow my analysis of him as far as, is he a full-fledged, complete prospect?
Yeah, I don't think he was ever complete because he could never defend, right? Like, that was always the big issue. Like, he was just a sieve defensively at Ohio State. But it's also worth noting, like, over the last 111 games, so over the last 2 seasons that he's played, he has only taken, like, 200 shots at the basket. He's only taking, like, 2.1 shots per game at the basket, and that counts transition opportunities. He, as you mentioned, does not really get all the way there to finish. It's just not something that he has in his toolbox right now. That's something that I thought would really get opened up by Kenny Atkinson's scheme, but you look at it on a rate basis, it hasn't really helped. He's just not a guy that's going to get all the way there, and that's a problem. Like, he's big, he's long, he's got enough change of direction and change of pace to where he should be able to get there and finish at the basket, but just doesn't do it. He just does not do it, and that's a problem for him. I don't know who I would take between him and Rozier. It would depend on situation. For Boston, I would take Rozier. For Brooklyn, I think I would take Russell because the ceiling is higher with Russell. Like, if everything gets figured out and he starts making better decisions, and like, the pull-up jump shooting is real, the passing vision is real. Like, it's just like kind of a different skill level than what Terry has. But Terry's just heart and hustle and everything that goes into that, man. Like, that's not a dude I would want to bet against either.
Yeah, I'm with you on pretty much across the board here. This is a big season for Russell. I think more so than maybe any of these other prospects we'll talk about, because I feel like he's not just pedigree with him as far as being drafted number 2 overall. There was a reason that he went that high. We just haven't seen enough from him in ancillary areas. Some of the shot selection has been horrendous. He gets the green light playing with Brooklyn, so maybe he goes a little bit over the top at times, but there's just a lot of areas he has to really improve upon. But I do still want some stock in him. I'm not giving up on him entirely, but this year is going to be big for me.
Caris LeVert also exists. If you had to take Caris LeVert or D'Angelo Russell, who would you take?
Russell.
Okay, I agree with you. Having said that, Caris LeVert, really good sophomore season last year. Averaged 12 points a game. Did it on, like, just slightly below average true shooting. Really, really good passer for his size. We knew that coming in. Like, he played a little bit of point guard for Michigan, but this is a guy that averaged 12 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds last year. That's 6'7" with like a 6'11" wingspan. Very different offensive skill set than what you see in most guys his size. Now, he's very skinny. He's not a guy who's going to be like a true defensive difference maker, but he is like a very, very interesting prospect who I would not write off being a long-term starter.
I loved him out of the draft. He's the kind of player I gravitate towards, like a secondary ball handler, at least I used to, that could really play make secondarily. Like, you watch him run pick and roll, he doesn't look like a wing. He looks more like a combo guard to even a point guard at times with some of the vision, the pace he plays in pick and roll. There's a lot of alluring qualities. It just comes down to, honestly, good enough rate 34.7% last year is not horrendous, but I don't think he's going to get by as a starter if he's less than a 35% 3-point shooter. He's got to spike that up because, like you noted, he does take a lot off the table defensively. He doesn't have great defensive footwork, and he doesn't have that strength, so he gets bullied a lot. I'm not sure how switchable he is overall. He's kind of his frame is just too narrow in that respect. So he's not going to. I don't know if he's not a good enough pull-up shooter to be a point guard. He's not a good floor spacer off the ball to be like a dynamic wing, and he's taking something off the table defensively. Someone that this is an archetype I've kind of moved away from over time. You just have to be a very special kind of offensive player to thrive in this role. We've mentioned CJ McCollum as like this kind of leading archetype here in the past, but I do like Caris LeVert. I like him as a prospect. Definitely have not given up on him, but not as bullish as I once was.
Yeah, like he's like a souped up version of Shake Milton, kind of, right?
That's fair. Yeah, I definitely think Caris LeVert has more off the dribble game for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I probably trust Shake shot a little bit more, but like Caris LeVert was another one of those guys. Great indicators as a shooter at Michigan. His final 3 years, he was over 40% every single season. That last year that he played 15 games only, he was over 50% from the field as well. He is, I think, a good shooter. Like, I think he will figure out the jump shot. And it was, more importantly, good to see him play 71 games last year. Like, the foot injury stuff is what made him slide down my board. Like, I didn't have him as a first-round pick because I thought most teams would have him just off their board because of the foot stuff. But in terms of talent, he was a first-round pick for sure. Like, he is there's a reason that for 2 straight years he was considered a potential lottery pick. He has the talent to be an NBA starter. He just needs to kind of continue to get better and better at some of the stuff that he hasn't quite shown yet from the NBA level, but has shown flashes of. As long as those flashes keep coming and as long as he keeps upping that production, which I would expect him to, I would expect him to be like a pretty damn close to being a starter this year who averages 15 points and maybe 4 assists and 5 rebounds a game. He does that on reasonable efficiency. Talking about a guy that is really just realistically in a really good place.
Yeah, and it's worth noting one more stat here. He had a 34.2% distribution in pick and roll as the ball handler as far as a finisher last year. That's very rare for like a wing kind of player. I mean, he plays more two guards, so just getting at his playmaking acumen. He's always someone who's made pretty good decisions, in my opinion. It's just more like the limiting physicality he has finishing through contact, and he was a good shooter, like you noted. In college, I think a lot of that was off the catch. I think he really struggled off the dribble, but I definitely expected him to shoot better from 3 off the catch. Hopefully that comes in the next couple of years because that would really elevate him a lot.
Combo forward Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is fascinating in many ways. Like, he averaged 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 2.5 assists a game last year. And he did it on like a just barely below average 54.8 true shooting percentage. Didn't really turn it over. Plays athletic defense that sometimes gets a little bit overzealous, but at the same time, he is a definite rotation player in the NBA, I think. I just don't know that it goes farther than that.
Definitely fair analysis. I actually had him in the same overall tier with D'Angelo Russell and Caris LeVert, even though I don't think he has the same upside. I think that the floor as being a rotation guy, I really like the Nets overall. I like the way they do things. They're putting him in a position to succeed, playing him more at the 4 where he can really he has a handle as a face-up creator. Like, he can get around less agile guys, get to the rim. They're really optimizing him because he's nothing off the catch as far as a shooter from 3. He just can't shoot from 3 off the catch. So they put him in situations where he can utilize his agility advantage, get to the rim. He's actually developed into a pretty decent playmaker for others too. Like, he can make passes on the move. I really like what they've done with him. I think that they've kind of salvaged his career because he's a guy on a lot of teams. They'd be like, well, you're not a 3, you can't shoot. So, we're going to put you later in the rotation. Maybe you're not going to get consistent minutes. And the Nets were like, we're going to try this kind of combo forward role, and we're going to try to optimize you offensively. I think it's paid dividends. Yeah,
he's just a very fascinating player in many ways. Like, playing him, like, they often play him with Damari Carroll. Like, I think that mostly they were used like throughout the season with Spencer Dinwiddie and Alan Crabb and Damari Carroll, so that the spacing element wouldn't get killed, right? Like, they needed to have all those guys on the floor, and they played them with, pick your center of Tyler Zeller for a while, then Jared Allen, and I think Quincy AC got a shot with them as well. And that lineup worked. Like, that lineup was actually like not terrible for what it was. So I really enjoy the stylings of Rondae Hollis-Jefferson as super high energy guy who can also really give you a boost on both ends.
Yeah, he can definitely switch, and then offensively he can post mismatches. He's big enough to where he can post smaller wings and create a little bit out of those settings. I'm a big fan of Kenny Atkinson. I love the Nets front office. So this is just another example of this being a really underrated developmental situation for a lot of these prospects.
Yeah, I agree. And, we should move on. We should talk about Jarrett Allen as well. Jarrett Allen is the next guy on this list. For some people, I think he would be right in this tier, right? Like, he was terrific as a rookie. I think that they didn't get nearly enough credit for the development that they undertook with Jarrett Allen over the course of his rookie season. 8.2 points, 5.4 rebounds in 20 minutes a night, 63 true shooting percentage, 5% block rate. Still not real great as a defensive rebounder, but that's fine. Like, he's figuring it out in a pretty substantial way, I think.
I actually think that a lot of people might take him as the number one prospect of any of these guys, frankly. Like his rookie year looked that. It wasn't like crazy convincing, but it was pretty positive. Like they even got him to take some threes. Yeah. Didn't take a ton of them. He was only 5 of 15, but he looked capable. I saw him shooting Summer League too. He's better than he got credit for coming out of Texas. I think a lot of that was situation-based. I'm using him as a rim runner more. Not the most high-level decision-maker as a passer, but again, just getting up and down the floor. He can very easily change ends. Good rim protector. Going to come down to how well he defends in space, a lot of this. But he's very intriguing. I do think he deserves to be in the same conversation as a lot of these guys because I do see starter upside with him.
Yeah, like I just tend to take wing over big, right? Because to me, that's the smart move to kind of go about this. But I would totally understand if you were like, Jarrett Allen is the best prospect on the Brooklyn Nets because you really believe in his upside as a super coordinated, great hands, rim protecting, pick and roll, pick and pop big man. Like he hasn't shown the ability that he can't do anything yet, right? Like, and he played a good amount of minutes last year. Like he played 1,500 minutes, I think. So like, you look at what he's shown so far, like he hasn't shown an incapability of anything, I don't think yet, if he keeps on this track.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that there's definitely intrigue. The foundation, the baseline is intriguing. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Not sure I know what he is yet because it's hard to tell with a lot of rookies based on situation, but I don't know how you can be anything but at least relatively optimistic moving forward. It wasn't like a rookie situation where you're down on him his second year. I think if anything, you're more like this guy could potentially become something.
Any thoughts on the Eastern Europeans, Dzanan, Musa, and Rodions Kurucs?
I've never been a huge Musa guy. Honestly, I get the production at a young age, like statistical indicators. There's a lot of positives for him. I don't like him that much defensively as far as his off-ball defense. I don't like his kind of how he's built, his posture.
Build.
Kind of
strange build.
He's kind of hunched over a little bit. I think he's more of a shot taker than a shot maker. I do think he can play make. He has decent feel offensively, but I'm not sure how much that translates. I had him as a first-round grade. I am at the end of the first round, like the 27th pick or 27th slot. So I understood the pick from their respect, but I'm not necessarily high on him until I see him more in an NBA setting.
Good question. Where did I have him on my final board? That is a great question that I am now looking up as we podcast and just kind of talking over it. I had him at 21 on my final board. The reason for that is that I think he's going to be a bench scorer. The productivity that he showed over in the Adriatic League portends well to him being a good player. I actually think the jump shot will come along at some point. Like mechanically, I think the jump shot works well. Good free throw shooter throughout the years. There are a lot more contested shots throughout Europe. So sometimes just because of the condensed offensive space combined with the higher level of smart basketball players, sometimes that can depress 3-point shooting numbers a little bit more than you would expect. Also an underrated passer, I think, as well. He can like play make out of pick and roll scenarios a little bit. Can like kick out to the opposite wing and get open shots for his teammates. Never going to defend, I don't think. I feel confident that he will not be a defender. But if you're talking about per minute scoring, very hard to feel anything but confidence with him, in my opinion, because he is just a very legit scorer. He can actually get buckets.
Yeah, I mean, 6'9", he has the positional size, which I really like. That intersection with the ability to play make. The passing is actually my favorite part of his game. Watching him on tape. I liked some of the reads he was making at his size. I don't think that's common at all. I just, again, have reservations about taking a guy who's a one-way player, and I don't really believe in the shot off motion. He can create off the dribble, but again, I'm not buying it to the extent that I need to have him higher than 27th on my board. But it did have him as a first-round grade, so for a lot of the reasons you noted.
Yeah, and then no one has seen Rodions Kurucs. I'm half joking about that, but like he's played so little throughout the course of the last couple of years because Barcelona has kind of held him back a little bit just because they knew that he was coming over to America immediately. He's signed like a 4-year, $6 million deal, if I remember correctly. So like he's taken care of now too. In second division Spain, 10.7 points. I think 3 rebounds and like maybe some assists here and there. I'm sure he had an assist at some point. But like more of a 6'10" athlete who's grown a little bit over the course of the last couple of years since he's been a prospect. More of a 4 now, like a playmaking 4 who really needs to develop as a jump shooter as opposed to a maybe combo forward who can kind of fly around.
Yeah, I honestly haven't seen him in a year. I watched him last year before the draft just to get an idea of him, seeing more of that combo forward role. Some of the slashing plays he had getting to the rim in straight lines were kind of intriguing to me, but I don't have a great read on him. Obviously, the Nets feel somewhat comfortable trying to lock him up 3 years, guaranteed, 4th-year team option. I think it's probably worth the risk, frankly. I mean, it's a slight cost. There's not much trade-off overall, but when I watched him play, I wasn't blown away by any means.
Yeah, he's a weird one. He's a tough eval, I think. All right, so we go from one New York-based team that is run competently to another New York-based team that run less so, I guess. Not great. The Knicks, they do have an interesting young group of talent, though, that in many ways is just kind of fascinating to me, in large part because they have taken such substantial risks in every way.
Yeah, definitely an intriguing group of guys. Of course, Porzingis being the figurehead here and all the injury risk with him. I actually think the Knicks, this is a very small act, but just the fact that they got Mitchell Robinson on that 4-year contract, 3 years with that team option in the 4th year, that shows me more competency as far as they have a plan. If he hits, they can exercise that Nikola Jokic opt-out in the 4th year to regain his restricted free agency rights. So they've made a couple moves, and they haven't really done anything terrible this offseason as far as spending on guys. We didn't see any Tim Hardaway Jr. situations this time around, but so maybe they deserve a little bit of a vote of confidence, but still very, very fair to be skeptical and at best cautiously optimistic.
Let's remain skeptical because I think that right now the Knicks would be my pick to finish with the worst record in the NBA next year.
Okay.
Look at their roster and take away Porzingis for 50 games.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, they're in contention. They're one of the 4 or 5 teams I could see do it for sure. So a lot of it's a very defensible argument.
Like it's them, Atlanta. I think that's it. Like I realistically think it's them or Atlanta.
I think just with the East, maybe that bumps them up a little bit compared to a team like the Kings, who I don't think are really any better. They're in the same tier to me. But yeah, I do agree with you there. I think those are the 3 teams that I fixated on. Orlando, too. I mean, they have, like Aaron Gordon, they have more established players, but they just don't have any perimeter creation. I think that how their team's designed, very defense-oriented without any kind of offense. They might be the worst offense in the league, so I think that also deserves some mention here. There's some candidates, but definitely there's some merit to having New York as the worst team in the league, especially without Porzingis.
Yeah, like they're in the bottom tier. They are definitely the worst team without Porzingis. No question in my mind. They are the worst team.
I'm pulling up their depth chart right now just so I can see who's actually projected to start for them. Are they probably going to start Trey Burke again, you would imagine, right? Mudiay, Trey Burke, oh God, Courtney Lee, Tim Hardaway. Yeah. And they start Enes Kanter at center, Hezonja at the 4. Yep, I'm on board.
Genuinely, Mario Hezonja is their 3rd best player? Maybe 4th?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. You're catching me off guard a little bit here. You can make an argument for that, man. I would still take a guy like Ntilikina, but maybe even he's supposed to be like their 2nd best player as far as actually getting rotation minutes next year. It looks a lot more dire when you look at the depth chart like this.
Yeah, I would say Tim Hardaway, Courtney Lee, and Enes Kanter are their 3 best players.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I think.
Well, I guess it depends on your vantage point as far as good. I mean, clearly it's going to tank well, so that's a good thing, I guess.
A lot of tank going on right there. A lot of tank. So let's just kind of talk about the young players here, though, because Porzingis, I think, will play next year at some point. When he is on the floor, he has developed into an all-NBA player, I think.
He's in the conversation for me. I might be a little bit more skeptical on that impact, but it's very close. We've talked about in the past his creation acumen, how he's improved his game in the post. He's become kind of like as much of a go-to scorer as a big can, who isn't like an incredible ball handler. He can get a shot at any time at his size. Defensively, great rim protection instincts, all that. Not great defending in space, but yeah, if I were to project him forward, I have him in the same elite tier as Jayson Tatum and Ben Simmons as prospects in this division. He's that kind of player when he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what he is capable of. He is a 23-point-per-game scorer. Not a great defensive rebounder. I would say that is probably, along with his mobility defensively, the two things that scare me the most about him. But elite shot creator because of the ability to shoot over players. Excellent player taking advantage of switches in pick and roll. An incredible pick and pop player because of the 3-point shooting ability. And probably one of the 3 best rim protectors in the league, along with Joel Embiid and Rudy Gobert, right?
He's up there. I mean, that's his main defensive input, is the length is really functional around the basket. He's got good instincts there. I think he hit the nail on the head as far as deficiencies defensively, being defensive rebounding and then just general mobility. Not like a hard hedge guy or like a switch guy. I mean, he can play an extra step off and switch a little bit, but I'm kind of dubious on him at the highest levels of play. Overall, I just wish he was kind of a better passer. I think that's his one main deficiency offensively. He's just not very good at making reads from the post. If he could really execute at a high level and be a go-to option where he can create for himself and for others, not just rely on difficult shots necessarily, but getting shots for his teammates, I would elevate him a little bit offensively. But the ability to shoot like he can, again, off motion, off pin downs, all of that is just invaluable when you're 7'2", and you can get your shot off at will.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. He's absolutely unbelievable when he's on the floor. The problem is that he now, I mean, we have to call it like a very real injury history, right? Like, I mean, he missed 10 games as a rookie, he missed 16 as a sophomore, missed half the year last year because he tore his ACL. This is a body that it just doesn't look like something you would want to trust long-term. You know what I mean? Just because it's taken such a gradual, long-term plan to build up his strength level to this stage that I just hope that we're not hitting that breaking point.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously I think we're all concerned. Everybody who watches basketball, when you see this guy get injured multiple times and he doesn't have the best build moving forward to kind of sustain that athletic performance. It's very hard, again, for a 7'2" guy to play in the NBA, the kind of minutes that he's playing. It's just not very natural as far as like body composition and all of that. So, I mean, obviously we're all pulling for him, but yeah, I think at this juncture, it's fair to be relatively skeptical long-term. And that's really unfortunate to say, obviously, when it comes to health.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Who would you say is the next best prospect on this team? Because it realistically comes down to 2 guys.
I even have it as 3 guys. I have Mitchell Robinson in this equation. I have him in this equation. I think that he is that kind of physical talent. We'll see on the actual NBA floor, but I have Ntilikina, Knox, and Mitchell Robinson all in the same tier. Oh boy, you could convince me a lot of different ways with this one. I went Ntilikina, but I could easily be persuaded by the other 2. For me, this is one of those too close to call. We haven't seen enough yet to really have, or at least for me to have like an established position on. Yeah,
I would probably go Kevin Knox. I believe in his offensive translation a little bit more after Summer League because he just looks a little bit more fluid offensively than what we saw at Kentucky. 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, has the size to play center realistically with a 9-foot standing reach. I believe he is going to be a very real scorer at the next level. Like, I think he's going to be able to get something between like 15 to 20 points a night at his peak. Defensively, there are questions in terms of how to best utilize him, I would say is the best way to put it, right? Like, I think you probably want to use him as a 4. How switchable is he? How good of a shot blocker can he become? Definitely some worries there. With Ntilikina, it's the opposite, though. We know Ntilikina is going to be a great defender. He's already a very good defender as a rookie that was 19 years old last year. I have still yet to really see the offense, though. Like, even going back to the Strasbourg days, going back to, I think he won MVP at the U19 in December 2 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Very, like, even there, like, the jump shot wasn't really there. It was all drive to the basket past less athletic people and finish at the basket, or pass out and create teammates looks while turning it over at a substantial rate. So I'm more hesitant about Ntilikina's offense than I am about Kevin Knox's defense, and I think offense is more important than defense. So I tend to put Knox a little bit higher.
I think that's fair. Honestly, for me, I've never really viewed Ntilikina through the sphere of he's going to be like a primary creator. I've always kind of seen him as more of a wing. If you do that, and I buy the shot off the catch, I think it's going to improve. He was a good shooter internationally. He was really good, actually, the year before the draft. I do buy him off the catch there. He can run a secondary pick and roll. He has pretty good overall feel on the court. Maybe not elite as far as decision-making and stuff. He still gets sped up a little bit, but I do feel like his poise eventually will win out. He can run a secondary pick and roll, and he can play both sides of the floor. So kind of that theme, again, that I've been talking about with the safety of having a guy who shoots and defends. And I really do believe in Ntilikina's defense. I think he's legit going to be one of the best point-of-attack defenders in the league. Maybe not elite-level quickness, but, man, that guy he leverages all his strength. He leverages his position. The length is a real factor. The aggressiveness he plays, but I think that's very, very real on that side. So even if he's not a primary creator, and I agree, I think it's fair to be skeptical that he's ever going to finish well enough. He's ever going to be the kind of deceptive dribbler who can have that advanced pull-up game. Even if that never comes, I still like him as like a wing type of guy. I think he can defend multiple positions and he can shoot the ball off the catch. And in the modern game, you get a guy like that who has feel. I think that's a pretty high floor, honestly. I've always been a little bit more skeptical on the ceiling.
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely fair. 100% fair. Mario Hezonja is who I have next. I do not have Mitchell Robinson next. That's
just
how
calling
much,
shots.
That's how much I believe in Mitchell Robinson figuring everything out in New York City.
Yeah, the New York City caveat is personally kind of troublesome, but we'll see. I mean, I just think the physical talent is there. We saw him in Summer League. Like, the guy who was an elite protector at AAU. He does have instincts. I think his awareness is actually kind of underrated defensively. Like, his technique is pretty poor. Like, he fouls way too much, and I think some of that's going to be improvable over time. But he's not like he doesn't know what he's doing off the ball. Like, he over rotates, but I found like a lot of rotations he made. I went back and watched his tape, and I was actually kind of impressed. And he's a very clean fit. Depending on how switchable he is, I'm kind of a little dubious with his higher hips and how he moves backwards in space and stuff. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But very clear offensive role as far as a pick and roll dive guy. Played that role exceptionally well in Summer League on the offensive glass too as a play finisher. So very easy route to value. It's just kind of, can he have the mental consistency? Does he get derailed off the floor in a city like New York? Can he maintain focus and not get distracted?
Yep. All that. that's all right. But here's what I'll say about the physical tools aspect too. He's definitely a player that is tailor-made for Summer League. Like, guy who fouls a shit ton, doesn't really know where the limbs on his body are all the time, body control struggles, not like a whole lot of game other than offensive rebounding. Like, even I wasn't even super impressed with him as a rim runner. It was just all like energy, creating extra opportunities, getting dump offs. It was stuff like that, like it wasn't even him making plays in pick and roll settings either.
It weren't a lot. I mean, he was basically a play finisher. So he was a lob catcher. He wasn't doing much he wasn't even catching the ball in short rolls. He had one kind of nice finish where it was like an up and under. I think he finished with his left hand that showed some nice touch. He did have a couple of nice touch finishes, which is something you notice from like a Capella type early in their career, where it's not like they don't have anything outside of just dunking. They have a little bit of touch. Maybe he can work with that, but he's mostly a play finisher. I mean, you don't want him doing all the stuff he's been doing in drills as far as dribbling and shooting pull-ups and off screens. That doesn't seem real to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think he's going to be a shooter. I think that he is hopefully a guy who finishes well enough around the basket and doesn't foul out of every game he plays.
That's probably a fair baseline. I'm a little bit more optimistic, but I mean, there's a reason he went 36 overall. There's some definite variance here.
Yeah, and look, like, if we're saying pure ceiling outcome, I would probably put him ahead of Ntilikina, probably not quite as high as Kevin Knox. but it's hard to think about this from a just pure ceiling outcome. Like, we've seen enough of him at this stage to have trepidation.
Yep. I agree. That's why I have him in the same overall tiers. You kind of have to weigh floor and ceiling and value and all that. I'm not as sold on Kevin Knox as a lot of people, but he could easily prove me wrong. I want to see it in an actual NBA game. But those three guys are the next in my tier, and then you get to Hezonja in the next tier for me.
The next guy is Hezonja that we should talk about. He is still a 1995 birthday, despite being on his second team. Still was a guy who went 5th overall in the draft. You can say that was an overdraft, and you'd probably be right. But at the same time, he is a guy who can really, really knock down shots whenever he has that aspect of his game going. He did only shoot 34% last year from 3, despite that being his breakout performance, right?
Yeah, not the most enticing sample as far as if that's his breakout and he's shooting, below league average when you are a shooter. But yeah, I mean, you could talk about this more, but when he moved to the 4, I think that kind of opened up his game a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what I think. He is a player who I think looks best at the 4 right now. And I would be interested to see rather large lineups of him and Kevin Knox with Porzingis at some point. That sounds intriguing to me.
Absolutely. I think just the overall approach here, I tweeted earlier that New York area has become this epicenter for reclamation projects. You see what the Knicks are doing, the Nets are doing, taking these high pedigree guys. I like the risk reward play. I mean, if Hezonja blows up, maybe he gets a bigger contract. I can't see it being that much sizably bigger unless he just shoots above 40% from 3 and shows playmaking acumen. But I like the dice roll here by the Knicks. I think it was very low risk, and it's the kind of move they need to make, building on the same timeline as their impact players, or at least the young players that they project to be impactful in the future.
Next guy I've got here is Emmanuel Mudiay. This might be too much confidence in Mudiay. I
had him in the same tier with Hezonja as well as Damyean Dotson, and I don't feel great about any of this, frankly. I don't know what the hell to do with Mudiay. I don't know, man. Is he even a good backup point guard at this juncture?
No.
Can we
actually know he's not a good backup point guard because Denver wanted to use him that way, tried to use him that way for half of a season, and then decided they had to go out and trade for Devin Harris because he wasn't good enough at it.
Yeah, it's really rough, man. I don't even know if he's going to be in the league that much longer. I think one more team maybe takes a chance on him after this contract, and then after that, I could easily see him falling out. Just doesn't do anything well. What does he do that's not what does he even do average on the floor? All the vision stuff, the decision making. This is another one of these examples where it just hasn't really played out. He can't really shoot, even though he's added. I think he's become a little bit better, more proficient off the catch as a spacer, but not going to add the defensive consistency. He has the frame, but he doesn't really have the intelligence. That's a problem with a lot of these guys. Is Mudiay, I don't think, has the highest basketball IQ. Hezonja, that's going to be an issue moving forward.
Just generally for the Knicks. Fair. Mudiay last year, the Nuggets were 9.4 points per 100 possessions worse with him on the floor offensively, 3.2 points worse defensively, for a combined net rating of 12.5, negative 12.5 net rating for Mario Hezonja. It was slightly better in New York, where it was a negative 11.8 net rating for Emmanuel Mudiay whenever he was in New York last year. Not great for Emmanuel Mudiay. And Mudiay did a lot of that with starters. So that's it's not great. Not a good sign.
Not great at all. I think the 2015 draft at this juncture kind of hurting a little bit at the top. We'll kind of see how that goes in the next year or two. But, man, some of these guys just have not translated at all as expected. And I was kind of lower on Mudiay overall, but I didn't think he'd be this bad.
Yeah, I was someone who had Mudiay higher than D'Angelo Russell on my board. I would take Russell now, but it looks like we were picking between two not great players, maybe is a fair way to put it.
Yeah, and if you go back over the list of league guards that were taken between 2013 and 2016, those drafts.
Oh, we've talked about this before, and it will be a full podcast discussion for us at some point. The point guard class in the NBA right now is a problem, I think. The young point guards in the NBA.
Yeah, let's just say that they need 2017 and 2018 to hit very desperately.
Yeah, and the 2019 class, I'm not 100% convinced there is a one and done point guard there. the 2020 class. I mean, I'm writing about this at some point next week, but like that class is not exactly a high end class. Like I have yet to see a true one and done, like, you know, for sure top 5 pick in that class. Like the best guards are probably like RJ Hampton. Like I think it's maybe Jalen Green too. Like, but they're both combo guards. They're both more shooting guards. And I'm sorry, Anthony Edwards is the best guard in that class, I think. But like he's a 2. He's not a 1.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to 2019. Like, Darius Garland, to me, seems like a poor man's Trae Young. Overall, just stylistically, I'm not sure if any of those guys are really even, like, top 10, top 14 guys if they even come out. So the NBA is kind of, I mean, that doesn't get talked about as much. We'll have that podcast on it at a later point in time. But 2013, 2016, those lead guard years did not do the NBA a lot of justice long term.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem right now for them in terms of point guard play long term. Damian Dotson, Alonzo Trier, Luke Cornett, Isaiah Hicks. Any thoughts?
I'm probably highest on Dotson. I wasn't enthralled with him in Summer League last year. I thought his off-ball defense wasn't great, but he showed some, good proclivity to switch a little bit. Just comes down to the shot. I'm not really enamored with any of these guys, but Dotson at least has, some intriguing size. Not great. Shot 32% from 3 last year. If he doesn't shoot the ball well, it's not going to get it done. I don't see him being like an impact defensive player. So I understood the dice roll in the second round, a potential 2-way guy. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm not super enamored with him.
I would probably pick Trier out of that group, but I am admittedly an Alonzo Trier stan. The Philadelphia 76ers. Ben Simmons had a good rookie year.
He's all right.
He's okay. I'd say he's like a useful basketball player at the very least.
He is a tier 1 player for me, as far as with Porzingis and with Tatum. I think those are the 3 guys in this conference or in this division that are tier 1 guys. We're not going to include Embiid, of course, as he's 24 and on the second contract, so he doesn't qualify here. He, of course, would be among the group, but I think Simmons is easily that guy for me.
So is Simmons the guy you would have highest rated out of this group?
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night. I think so. And I'm not even someone who really buys the jumper coming along, especially from 3. Like, I don't think he's ever going to have a pull-up 3 game. I know some people are more optimistic on that, and that's going to limit his upside. But, man, it's really close with him and Tatum. Like, I think Tatum's a little safer in certain respects because he's going to shoot it, and he's just such an easy plug-and-play guy in the modern game, whereas intrigue there comes at such a higher ability. But Simmons, I think, is just a special talent. But he really needs to figure out either one of 2 things. He needs to become a better finisher as far as being more power and not so much finesse with these floaters and getting more craft down there, or he needs to become like a more capable jump shooter outside of 15 feet. One of the 2 things has to happen. I'm going to bet on it tentatively, but I do get the reservations because we rarely see guys who are top-level NBA players, talking like top 5, top 7 guys, who can't shoot the ball at all off the dribble, and they're perimeter players mostly. It's just very rare.
Can I just say, like, I'm kind of not worried about him figuring out one of those 2 things. Whether or not he figures out both is, like, that would be aiming high. And if he figures out both, he is maybe the MVP. Like, he might win
he's the best
MVP.
player in the league. He's the best player in the league if he figures out both. I'm fully confident in that. If he can shoot the ball at the dribble at all and he can get to the rim and finish at a higher rate than he's doing, he's the best player in basketball to me.
Yeah, like if he starts shooting from 16, like you said 15, we'll just say 15 for the hell of it. But like if he starts shooting from that range even, and defenses have to like start respecting that pull-up jumper, like he might win MVP like that even without the other improvement.
It's just a hard game, man, to be that efficient from mid-range. But if he can threaten enough to get by guys, I still think that guys are going to sag off and force him to shoot that. It's kind of like how the Spurs defended LeBron early in their finals encounters. It's just very difficult to win that way, and LeBron's much better than Simmons will ever be in his career. But man, there's just so much intrigue. Talking about 6'10", that kind of power, the versatility in his game again is the most underrated part. He can just do so many things on the floor. You can take him away right now, like the Celtics did for the most part offensively. If you take him out of transition and if you force him to play a certain style, that's possible. But again, I think that his versatility is going to win out, especially if he gets paired with someone like Fultz, who can kind of compensate for some of his weaknesses.
The fucking craziest thing with Ben Simmons is he is a guy who shot 56% from the line, who literally cannot shoot threes, who had an above average true shooting percentage this year because he is so ridiculous while averaging he averaged 16, 8, and 8 on a plus true shooting percentage while playing like top 20 defense at the wing position.
He's a generational talent, man. I've always been in this camp. I think that his upside, both his floor to value and his upside are so high. You just don't see 6'10" guys who can initiate your offense. And we haven't seen like the pick and roll man stuff. We haven't seen him as a short roll guy. We haven't seen him as a lob threat. He can do that stuff. He showed that at LSU. You can play him at a small 5. You can switch everything. We're just getting into what he can do as a player, even though I'm a little bit more hesitant on his ceiling really coming through in those two areas as far as finishing ability and then pull-up shooting. But, man, I mean, if he gets one of those two things, again, I think he's a top 5 guy. He might be a top 5 guy as far as this current trajectory as is. Like, he's that damn good.
Yeah, so, like, the thing with him is I think that those skills are probably connected, right? Because I feel like one thing that happens with him is he does a lot of the finesse finishing stuff because he is unwilling to absorb contact because he doesn't want to go to the foul line, right? But yeah. I think that he has the ability to finish whenever he wants. Like, he's just that coordinated. He's that strong. He's that explosive. He's that fluid. He has that kind of touch. Like, he has everything you're looking for in terms of finishing. It's just that I think he sometimes avoids it. And if he gets good as a free throw shooter from 15 feet, exactly, gets to like 72, 75% from the line, it's all going to come together because he's just going to start bowling in, absorbing contact, and just dominating in the way that we see LeBron. Like, for him to only take 4 free throw attempts a game with the way that he is as an athlete, it's crazy to me.
Yeah, and he definitely flashes it, man. We've noticed this on the podcast before. Like, he can show physicality. He can put people in the fucking basket, and that's what I love to see from him. When he plays with that kind of approach and he gets downhill, he's almost near impossible to stop. Like, he can dislodge Bam Adebayo by 3 feet with a head of steam. Like, that dude, when he gets downhill, is a real problem. It's just, I see too much, like, maybe it's that issue as far as he doesn't want to go to the line and he's hesitant. I see a little bit too much finesse in his finishing, too many runners, like some sky hooks and stuff. I just wish he would just be more physical, be like Giannis, where Giannis is dropping his shoulder and he's using his length. Simmons doesn't have the same length. I don't think he's ever going to be the same level of finisher as Giannis because he's just freaking generational. That's his LeBron trait. Not quite LeBron, but in that realm, Giannis is an incredible finisher. I don't see Simmons getting to that level, but if he can improve upon his rookie year and just have that consistent mental approach as far as physicality, I think in conjunction with that, if you start using him in more versatile ways, you're going to see him even go up another tier here.
Yeah. No, I 100% agreed. The defense this year was ridiculous too. He was incredible defensively. Like, already a top 20 defender, probably like on the wing in the NBA right now, right?
Yeah, he's Philadelphia's second best defensive player behind Embiid. I think Embiid's the most important, but we even saw like Simmons is better. Or you think Simmons is better than Embiid?
No, I think he's worse than Covington.
No, I think Simmons is better than Covington.
Why?
And like, this is coming from someone who loves team defense, and that's where Covington is great. But we saw what happened to Covington against the Celtics. When you pair him against those ultra athletes, he just doesn't have the ability to slide with those guys. And Simmons is freaking athletic as all hell. And I agree that Covington's a better team defender because Covington's incredible. All his advanced stats are great. But when you get him in a playoff setting where it's like more switchy and you really have to contend against those higher level athletes, I don't want to overreact to one series, but I did think we saw some limitations in his game last year. And Simmons can move with absolutely everybody on the floor.
That's fair. I will accept that. I think that is totally reasonable. Let's move on. Let's talk about the rest of the 76ers guys. Dario Saric, I think, is one of the most underrated players maybe in the NBA right now. You look at all that he has brought in terms of his ability to kind of play off of just everything that Philadelphia does. It's such a valuable skill set.
Dario is really interesting to me. Probably someone I didn't give a fair enough shake to. He's really improved as a shooter, almost 40% last year. I do think, again, he's going to get kind of taken advantage of at the highest levels because just the general athleticism. He can compensate for a lot of it with his skill. He's really important to that team as far as leadership and all of that. He's a really good player. Like, he's a starting caliber player on maybe even a really good team to me. Like, he's that skilled with that size. It gives Philadelphia specifically, it just gives them a different dynamic that nobody in the league can really match their level of size and skill, and he's a big part of that.
So Dario Saric, one of 7 players in the NBA last season to average 14.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists on a 58.0 true shooting percentage. That's insane. He has 2 more years left on his rookie contract, and he's already a legit, like, high-end NBA starter. If you were like, so like people keep bringing this up, and I do as well, so like I'm not immune to it, but like people keep bringing up the idea of whether or not you would trade Dario Saric for Kevin Love, like not even in terms of like salary difference, because I think that makes it like completely insane to even discuss, but like if you had to bet on Dario's next 4 years or Kevin Love's next 4 years, who are you betting on?
I mean, Dario for me. And I don't think that Dario is ever going to be as good as Kevin Love, but at the same time, there's just far less risk, and he aligns better with their core. Like if Love goes off the tracks, Philadelphia is not the right team to kind of gamble on him, in my opinion. It's just the upside isn't high enough, and it's not like the gap. Even if you think Kevin Love is a better player than Dario, which is definitely justifiable, honestly, I would probably lean that way as far as in this moment right now. I don't think the difference is appreciable to the point that you wouldn't take Dario's youth.
Yeah, I think Kevin Love's a lot better than he is right now, but I'd bet on Love being better next year and then Dario being better the next 3.
I think that's definitely fair.
The next guy that we should talk about is probably the most complicated evaluation here
in the league.
So many reasons. Markelle Fultz. He is very good at basketball when he's got his head on straight. He averaged like 22, 6, and 6 at Washington. He could shoot from distance. He could pull up shoot. He could finish at the basket. He has shake and creativity and passing ability and everything that you're looking for in a lead guard. And just missing that one little thing right now.
Sans the yips. Yeah, everything you're looking for and stuff. I don't know what to do with him. I put him in like his own tier is like turquoise or something. No idea.
The Fultz tier.
The Fultz tier. Like, what are we getting with him is like the $1 million question to me in the East. Like long term, if you look at how these teams are constructed, if Philly gets prospect Fultz, I think they vault to the top of the East long term. I just think they're going to be so good because their pieces fit so well, because Fultz complements Simmons incredibly well with his shooting ability. They just need one perimeter guy who can get his own shot anytime from NBA 3, run a pick and roll like that. They just don't have him. Like, for all of TJ McConnell's success, he's not that kind of creator, even though he was awesome in the playoffs last year. They need someone with Fultz's scoring acumen who can also shoot in space off the ball. So if he hits, it's a home run for Philly. I think they have their core 3. That was always the idea. And why they probably had some trepidation about trading him for Kawhi Leonard, because they really do believe in him long term. But I don't know how anybody can have like a steadfast opinion, an entrenched opinion on this guy right now. We've said this how many times on the podcast? Like, I've never seen anything like this before.
No, I've never seen anything like this. With a number 1 overall pick, as talented as he is, I can't remember a prospect in any sport that like is this bizarre to me. Maybe like Rick Ankiel, like the old St. Louis Cardinals pitcher who got the yips and then just like couldn't find the plate. But like Fultz was genuinely the best prospect in the NBA. I mean, you could say maybe Ankiel was the best prospect in baseball, but like Fultz was unquestionably the number 1 player in his class. And like nobody knows what happened here. It is bananas to me that we have to try and figure out what is going on with him. I think he's making the right decision going with Drew Hanlon. Drew fixes guys. I've been around that gym. I've been around St. Bernard's. I've been around his process. It is so detail oriented. Its entire basis is around giving players confidence when they make moves, and like the detail oriented nature of knowing what you're doing every single time you step on the basketball floor, depending on what the defender does against you. He is, if anyone can fix him, it's Drew. I have no idea. I hope he does. I hope it works.
Yeah, I'm pulling for this. Is an all-timer for Drew. If he fixes this, he's going to have a statue in Philadelphia. It's one of the best jobs if he does this. If he returns him to prospect form, literally that Colt will build him a statue.
100% here for Joel Embiid and Markelle Fultz's trainer to get a Philadelphia statue, much in the same way as Rocky. Like, just put him up on those steps, basically.
It's very much a possibility. Like, that's the stakes here. If they can get that prospect version back, my goodness, the sky's the limit for them.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's worth discussing how good Fultz was before, though, because he was so good. He was like for sure the number one overall pick in that class, I think. Boston will tell you differently, but I would bet they were like, if not on an island with Jayson Tatum, they were like one of 2 or 3 teams.
Yeah, and I think especially on the court play, I think Fultz was the number one prospect. Maybe Boston saw something in Tatum's work ethic, which seems like it's historically good as far as his drive and stuff that drove him to be better. Maybe they saw that and like, okay, well, there's not a huge difference between these guys. That makes sense. But I think if you watched Fultz at University of Washington, just all the skill stuff, the deceptive dribbles, I don't think I've ever seen somebody dribble like him as far as that style, those big hang dribbles. He can create space basically at will when he has the threat of his shot. And then the passing craft, he had a lot of NBA caliber skill plays as a passer, like wraparound passes. He would just double spin move you and then wrap a ball around a big in between 2 guys. It was just unreal, a lot of the stuff he was doing. The talent is definitely there. If the mentality is there, he's going to hit if he can get the shot back. But he was an incredible prospect.
It's his brain thinks about basketball differently than most people's does. It's very hard to explain unless you see him like in a gym. Like I saw him at Hoop Summit and then like just asked him like, you do a lot of really weird creative things even while you're training. Like, why do you do that? And, you know, he just kind of said, I think that my brain thinks this way. This is what I try and do. So like, I get it, but it's still crazy to me. Like it's 100% crazy to me that someone could be this creative as a mind playing basketball.
Yeah, that's always the thing that stood out about him is I've just never seen quite like he's like an artist on the floor kind of. I'm not sure if like cerebrally he's like the smartest basketball player, but just the way he moves and like the pace of play, it's just so off kilter from anything. It's like Manu Ginobili came in the league. He's not exactly like Manu, but just stylistically, certain guys come into the league and they just move at a different pace and they operate differently, and it just throws guys off. Like he would just do things that guys weren't used to defensively, like an extra dribble, like an extra step. All of this stuff just throws off defenders because it's so offbeat, and that's what kind of made him super special. Outside of the pull-up shot, that was his most important skill. But I thought like the dribbling acumen and kind of just the style of play that he played at just made him so deceptive and so hard to guard.
Yeah, I'm very interested to just see if he can get back to that. This guy is kind of just in a tier on his own, so I want to just talk about him really quickly. Like TJ McConnell is a 1992 birthday that is still on his rookie contract, or at least like the first contract that he signed whenever he got to the NBA. He is, for me, one of the best backup point guards in the NBA. I love watching him play. I don't really know how much the 76ers should prioritize him necessarily. I love the fact that he got way better as a jump shooter this year. He's still not super competent with it, but like you could see that the improvement was there. Very good distributor, aggressive defender, like just one of those hard-nosed dudes that like kind of is the perfect player you want to have on your team as a backup, but I don't really know what to make of it either.
Yeah, he's a rotation guy for me, but he can be a valuable one. He's already earned his contract. It's been pretty remarkable what he's been able to do, just being at an athletic disadvantage, but just having that cerebral anticipation as a passer, not somebody who can turn the corner at will by any means, and just kind of living off not being a knockdown shooter either. It's just a lot of craft, a lot of intermediate play, and a lot of hard-nosed defense. I mean, he's bypassed anything I ever expected from him already. And I do think long-term on Philadelphia, a lot of this is going to come down to cost analysis as far as these contracts. You're going to have to max Simmons. If Fultz hits, you're going to have to max Fultz. You're already maxing Embiid. You can't pay everybody. So I think a point guard like McConnell is probably a casualty if he gets like $6-7 million a year. But he's a guy I don't have any druthers about having on my roster. Yeah, no, I completely 100% agree with that. Zaire Smith is next. This is a Zaire Smith friendly podcast. It's really the only Zaire Smith friendly podcast on the internet, I think. So according to iTunes,
I will let you go on ahead and talk about Zaire Smith for as long as you want.
I mean, I don't really have much to add about him. He kind of is like in summer league. He was. I'm just saying, like I do like the dynamic he gives Philadelphia. I will say that as far as more of a switchable guy. I think that there's a lot of hardline opinions on the McHale Zaire swap, and not even factoring the 2021 pick. But I do think the Zaire gives them an element that they didn't have. This ultra athlete who can really switch, get into guys. They can defend more like ones and twos. Philadelphia just doesn't have anybody that can do that. Covington can't do it. I don't think McHale is best suited to do that either. So I like that dynamic long term. His passing in Summer League was a lot better even than I expected, and I was relatively high on his vision, not necessarily his decision making, but he showed flashes there. It's going to be more of a project. I mean, that's the key is can he shoot the ball? Can he play off these guys? I think he's going to be a nightmare, playing off Simmons in transition. If you can get out and run, like Zaire's probably the best suited guy I can possibly think of to play off Simmons there, and switch defensively, cut off the ball. I thought his teammates missed him a lot in summer league as far as, Simmons is not going to miss those reads because he's one of the best in the league already at them. So I got the fit for sure. I have him actually in the same tier as Dario Saric, which I know is ludicrous probably to you. And Dario is clearly the better player right now, but I'm very high on Zaire's like superstar role player type potential moving forward, but it might take multiple years, even though the functional athleticism is going to translate defensively from the off.
Sure. Okay.
How do you like that filibuster?
Having him in Dario's tier is so bananas.
I gotta shake it up on this podcast sometimes, man. Come on.
It's so much. I love it. I'm here for the takes. Furkan Korkmaz. Let's talk about the 40-point man at Summer League. Yes, Furkan Korkmaz dropped 40 in a game at Summer League this year. I think that says enough about Summer League in general. Do we think he will be in the NBA by year 4 of his contract?
He is not in Dario's tier. He is a tier below, or 2 tiers below for me. I don't know what to expect of him. I saw the 40-point game, and everybody's freaking out about that. Some people came to the next game expecting to see Furkan. They came to see Furkan. I think he had like 1 point in the next game. And they're like, who the hell is this guy? Like, why is everybody talking him up? So if he makes shots, I think he's something. He's got some positional size. I don't think he's ever going to be anything defensively. Maybe a little craftier than he gets credit for. But on this team, like if he can shoot off screens, this is one of the situations. Landry Shamet, I have in the same tier with him here as well as Shake Milton, kind of just all filtered in as far as guys who can shoot off motion. That's what Philadelphia wants. That's why they're trying to trade for Kyle Korver. That's probably why they haven't gotten someone like David Nwaba, because how they run their offense, they want guys who can play off Simmons, can play off Embiid, run off these down screens, these floppy sets. So I think it's a good situation for Furkan there. Furkan
took 46 threes in 149 minutes of Summer League action.
That's so good, dude.
Like, so many, man. So many threes. I'm here for it. I'm all the way here for it. So many threes. Shot 37% from 3 on them. Yeah, I agree with you. It's all about the 3-point shot. I do like the fact that he can shoot off of movement. Like, I feel really confident about that. I think he's kind of a sneaky passer whenever he's not just like taking every single shot in the world, because he dropped 40 points in the first game that he played at Summer League. He's also an underrated athlete. He just doesn't utilize that athleticism defensively. He's not strong enough. He's not going to be able to knock a guy off of his point of attack. He's just not a disruptive player because he's not strong enough. But offensively, I can see a world where he stays in the NBA for a while.
I agree. And I think that overseas he showed more pick and roll kind of creativity. He did show some actual legitimate vision and some dribble moves that are kind of interesting. I'm not sure. I'm pretty skeptical on how that translates. And I don't think that's really going to be his role. To me, he just looks more like a bench shooter. And we'll see how salvageable he is on defense. But I don't think it gets to a level where he's any kind of a starting caliber player.
You're with me on the Shake Milton over Landry Shamet boat, right?
No, I'm actually on Shamet over Milton, but it's not like gaping. I just think the Shamet shoots the ball off motion better, and his feel level overall, I mean, they're pretty comparable as far as feel. They're both smart players. It's just I trust Shamet to like sprint around a screen in Philadelphia's system more than I trust Shake, and that's really what it boils down to. I don't really think, I mean, Shake obviously has better length. I don't think either one are really great defensively. Like, they're not that athletic. Shamet actually has pretty quick feet, but he's just doesn't have the strength. He gets run through too much. He's not very versatile. I don't think Shake is, again, athletic enough, good enough leaper to really challenge a lot of defensive possessions. So they're both like defenders, but you're drafting them for their shooting, and I think that Shamet wins out to me.
Yeah, I thought Landry was really bad defensively this past year. Like, I thought that it was a problem for Wichita State. Wichita State returned as much defensive talent as any team in the league this past year, and they were atrocious defensively the entire season. I think that his inability at the point of attack played a pretty big role in that, in my opinion.
That's fair.
In terms of the offense, he's an interesting pick and roll decision maker. He's a good passer, a smart decision maker more than anything. But again, the jump shot, he needs to be like a 45% 3-point shooter, I think. Like, maybe not even 45, but like he needs to be like a 42% 3-point shooter versus a 38, 39% 3-point shooter. Otherwise, I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and that's what you're betting on with him, is he actually has that in his range of outcomes, which a lot of wings don't, especially off movement. They can't shoot
I definitely don't think he's a wing. I think he is a point. Like he might be like a point next to Ben Simmons, and that's like
what I was getting at.
That's a very interesting fit because Ben is able to like dominate the ball, but he's not like a JJ Redick wing either.
Yeah, no, I think I'm more in alignment with you, more of playing off Simmons and like I guess a de facto point guard role. I do think, Redick is a better defensive player, he's stronger and stuff like that. I don't think the difference is going to be insane depending on IQ and how that translates and all that stuff. But I get what you're saying overall. You kind of want him more as playing the one, I guess, conceptually defensively, and then playing more off the ball offensively. I think that's going to be his role. He's going to kind of play the Jared Bayless role for the Sixers, even as soon as this year, but probably next year maybe.
Yeah, and like, look, he's a good kid from all intents and discussions that I've had. He's really, really smart, plays with a high IQ. Maybe it'll work. We'll see. I like Shake a little bit more because I like the frame and the shooting ability. Landry's a better shooter, but I don't think it's like a major difference. And the length, I think, is just going to give Shake so much more versatility defensively.
Yeah, the length definitely benefits Shake defensively. I'm not sure if it's still going to be to a level that's even, not impactful, but even like salvageable or even like an average level. So really for me, I don't think either guy is much defensively. Maybe they're both not absolutely deficient, even though you can see that, especially for Shamet with his lack of strength. It's just for me, I think that, again, Shamet shoots better off of motion specifically. Shake is good off the catch. I went back and watched all his shooting possessions over his 3 years, and I think he made mechanical improvements as time went on. I trust him to shoot a catch and shoot three, but I don't think he can partake in the same amount of sets for the Sixers as Shamet can. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Let's move on to the last team here, which, thank God, the Raptors don't have much. OG Anunoby, though, is a guy that we really do need to take some time and at least discuss briefly. He had a great rookie season. Starter on a 59-win team. Handled himself well defensively against a very difficult matchup in Cleveland. Not much of anything offensively, and I'm very worried about that long term. But offensive or defensively, he has like all defensive team potential, I think. Yeah, he is in my second tier. So behind Jayson Tatum, right now Jaylen Brown's a better player, but I actually have him in the same tier as Jaylen Brown. So that's how high. Oh boy. That's my second take. That's my second take of the podcast. I think that his defensive ceiling is higher than Jaylen's. That's fair. Defensively, I think it's higher. I agree. He's stronger. He's longer. He's crazy. He's a freak show athlete as far as all of that goes. I think he's decent off the ball. He makes pretty good decisions. I think I'm actually higher in his decision making off the ball than Jaylen's there. Offensively, I'm buying a little bit the shot. I think that he shot well enough. He shot better than I expected from three from the off. I'll say that. He needs to be surrounded by creators and stuff, and he's not going to shoot off motion, but as a corner three-point shooter who can attack closeouts, and maybe in time he can come off a down screen or something and do more. He's had really intriguing flashes of handle. Like even in Summer League, like he would like change pace and get to the rim in a pick and roll setting. I'm not sure how much of that is real. He showed that in preseason last year too, like a spin move, like finishing around a guy. There's more coordination, I think, than he gets credit for, but mostly you're betting on the three-point shooting off the catch translating. He was like the 72nd percentile overall last year on off the catch in the half court. I think that's workable. I mean, he's never going to have a pull-up jumper. I don't think that's within his range of outcomes. It's just not that fluid. But as a system player who's like a consummate 3-and-D guy who can switch mainly like at times all five positions and they can shoot the ball off the catch, I think I'm relatively optimistic that he's going to get to like valuable potential impact starter on a really good team. Yeah, I think he can definitely be a starter on a really good team. We've seen that already. I think he can provide certainly much more impact than we saw offensively because he was invisible this year most of the time offensively. The big key is that he needs to keep he's just not anything off the dribble right now. He looked a lot more uncomfortable passing than what I thought he would after showing some improvement there during his sophomore season at Indiana. He's just very, very limited, I think, as an offensive player right now. Very, very, very limited. And that's okay. There are limited players who play in the NBA and make a real impact even as a starter. If you told me he was Andre Robertson with a jump shot, like that's an incredibly valuable player, right? That's like a top that's like a top 3 player on like a title contender almost, dude. Like Roberson is like, he's like one of the best defensive players. I mean, there's certain metrics that have him as the number 1 perimeter defensive player in the league. If you give that guy a jump shot, if he's shooting like 38, 40%, holy shit, dude. I mean, it depends on your creators, of course, but that guy
like, I mean, like, let's just, Andre Robertson's a really good starter, and like, he is a very good defensive player, but like, third best player on a title team is,
if he can
like,
shoot.
If you look at who the best players on title teams have been, like, over the years, I mean, he's not even Rip Hamilton if he's that good. Like, if he can shoot threes, if he can only shoot threes and still not attack closeouts, still not really be much of a threat anywhere else.
I think he can attack closeouts. So I guess I'm a little bit higher on his coordination. Thought he showed some actual promising passing acumen. He's not like a high-level creator, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's even like a secondary ball handler, but I think
I love Andre Robertson too. Like, I don't mean to talk shit about Robertson. I think he is awesome. I love that dude, and I love watching him play. But like, little far.
I'm just saying, like, how many guys, if you look back historically, how many 6'8" wings that can shoot the ball and play high level defense are there? And you like Shane Battier, he's not Shane Battier as far as intellect, but that, like, he was a huge impactful player in his career, and he wasn't like the best creator. He was mostly like a spot up shooter.
Right, and he was still like the 6th best player on a title team.
Well, that was the Heat team. That doesn't really count. Like, this, I mean, I think he was probably higher than that. He's probably like 4th. Maybe I'll reserve judgment and say 4th best player on a title team or something. But if you put him next to like Embiid and Simmons, like true like top 5 guys, he could be the number 3. It just that's my way out of this.
Oh my god! I love the fit next to Kawhi. I will say that with OG Anunoby, the fit next to Kawhi is going to be so fun.
Oh, it's incredible! Like, that gives them the best. This is why I think they're easily the hardest matchup for Boston, is because they actually have the wing infrastructure to guard those guys. Like, those guys can stick with Tatum and Brown pretty well. I'm interested to see like what progressions OG takes. I'm guessing they're not going to task him with too much, but maybe with DeRozan out, Kawhi doesn't really command the ball the same way as DeRozan does. So maybe they give him more creation opportunities. We can kind of get a better semblance of what he could be as a ceiling. But overall, I just think that he's a little underrated even right now. Like, I think there's a poll on Twitter earlier about would you take Kyle Kuzma or OG Anunoby long term. I would take OG in like 100 times out of 100. Like, not close for me.
I think it would. Yeah, I'd take Anunoby. I don't even need to like qualify it. I would take Anunoby.
I just think the defense, man.
Yeah, it like the defense is very real. And his like Anunoby's defense is better than Kuzma's offense, and Anunoby's offense is better than Kuzma's defense.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I agree with you. I would take Anunoby.
I'm obviously like super high on the guy. Like, I think that there's like, historically, again, this is why I liked him in the draft, because how many of these guys that are built like this come around? Like, when's the last time somebody was like this? It just doesn't happen. If this guy even shoots the ball, if he gets to 40% from 3, like, holy shit. And if he adds movement, we're talking about a super, super high level impactful guy on a title team. It just doesn't happen.
So if he gets to 40% from 3, he's probably averaging like 12 points a game, right? Like something in that range.
Yep. Maybe
like 6 rebounds. So he's like a 12-6 guy with elite level defense.
Yeah, and I think he's
that's
a gravity
that's
threat.
really, really good. Don't get me wrong.
Just a really conducive fit on a title team. I think he can get higher than points is going to come down to transition and some secondary cutting stuff. So it's always hard for me to project points, but maybe like the 12 to, I can't see him getting to like obviously 20 points a game. I think that's a very, very bullish ceiling outcome, but like 12 to 17, maybe in time. I do again, I believe more in his coordination than a lot of people do. He's shown the flashes.
So like if you're a 12-6 all defense guy, like I'm trying to think, like it's hard to think of like players like him. You know what I mean? Because he is just so freakishly long and so freakishly like big. Like he's like center big in small ball lineups, which makes it like very, very difficult. Man, like, because like he'll never be Draymond offensively because he's never going to run like primary pick and rolls.
Nope.
He's like a worse Andre Iguodala. Like Andre can run primary pick and rolls. Like I don't really have a comp. That's what makes this so hard. Like there really is not a comp.
I think this is like a more high end outcome, but like early career Kawhi Leonard when he was like 22 and still like a pure 3-and-D guy, and he didn't have any of the pull up. Like,
here's
maybe
one. Is it Bruce Bowen?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think OG can do a little bit more of the ball, but That's pretty close. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's more of a high level 3-and-D prospect if he shoots. Again, I think that maybe Kawhi, just athletically, I think OG can stick with Kawhi there. That's like one of the rare kind of physical build as far as strength, length, movement skills guys. If he can add that 3 and it becomes to the level that Kawhi's was when he was like 22 or 23, when he might have been the best 3-and-D prospect of all time, I don't expect that. But that's like not entirely impossible, which is really intriguing to me.
I will bet against that. For what it's worth. I will bet against that.
Of course. Pascal
Siakam, let's move on. I love Anunoby. I think he's very, very good. Like I just said, I would take him over Kyle Kuzma. That's the kind of player we're talking about. Like I think he is an incredibly talented player, but tough. It's tough sometimes.
So Siakam.
I am a big Pascal Siakam guy. I think he is, and by like a big Pascal Siakam guy, I mean like I think he is a perfect third big man for an NBA team.
I agree with that completely. We're going to get back into alignment here. I think that he gives you a lot of advantages in the modern game as far as switchability. One of the best motors in the league, in my opinion, for bigs. Just plays hard all the time, has high-level athleticism, can make a situational 18-footer, but I think that's the biggest problem with him is he's not really a threat on the floor offensively, even though he has made improvements there. So if he can add a jump shot, I think that's when he becomes potentially really intriguing. Last year, he took 123 shots in the half court off catch and shoots, and he was in the 8th percentile.
Yeah.
So 22% field goal percentage, not going to get it done. But if he adds that, I think he can become really, really high level intriguing.
I will say he is known as like a ridiculously hard worker, like tireless worker. So I am intrigued by his potential to improve. Like I think that we've seen leaps from him basically every single season that he has been a known quantity, right? Like he was at New Mexico State. He like averaged 12 a game as a freshman, was good, crazy good rebounder, and then took a leap to 20 and 12 as a sophomore, then played a role on a like good 50-win Toronto team, started a bunch of games, and then took another leap next year. This year. So like I have positive feelings about the trajectory of his career. If you told me that he turned into a really interesting small ball starting center because he developed that jump shot, I would not call you crazy, but I think it's more likely he settles into that like really energetic backup range.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's hard to project with like a high level confidence of him adding a 3-point shot even off the catch, despite the work ethic, which is obviously phenomenal. He's already made other improvements in his game. I just love the energy that he plays with. There's going to be, it's kind of like a Montrezl Harrell kind of situation. Not exactly the same player, but that kind of archetype I do feel like has more value even in the playoffs. Some of the Raptors lineups they can unleash with all of these guys. We're talking Kawhi, OG, Siakam at the 5, Danny Green, Kyle Lowry. It's going to be really fascinating because I think those lineups are tailor-made for the playoffs in the modern game.
Yep, totally agree. Let's move on. Let's talk about DeLon Wright. DeLon Wright is closing in on being the oldest player on this list, but just a little bit younger than TJ McConnell. 8 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, a lot of versatility defensively. Can play basically 1 through 3. They kind of moved him up and down the lineup throughout the season. They played him with 2 point guards sometimes, meaning they had 3 point guard lineups out there. They also just played him as the point at times. He's a very multi-versatile player. Also had a couple of big playoff games where he really kind of got them going again. I would still say that I think he's still like a third guard nonetheless. Like I'd be surprised if he developed into more than that.
I agree with you. I think that, but he's also like a third guard that I'd want on a good team. Like he's that good. I think that that's the thing about the Raptors is they have these guys that even though they're reserves, they can be high level reserves. I'm not sure if he's ever going to shoot it well enough to be a starter. He does some really impressive things defensively.
Big improvement I think there though this year. That's like worth saying.
Yes. So maybe it does happen. He's already, I was kind of surprised that he was already 26. Like looking at the list, I was like, damn, I didn't think he was quite that old, but it's possible. If he gets there off the catch, he was pretty solid on unguarded shots in the half court last year up the catch. So I think that even when you watch him on tape, it's passable. It's just a question of can he make more strides there. He can handle the ball secondarily for sure. He played point guard in college, so I don't have a problem with his ball skills overall. He just doesn't have like a really dynamic pull-up game, so he's not going to be your point guard, but it's like kind of a combo guard 2-3 that isn't an ideal fit with his lack of shooting off motion and all of that in the modern game. Is probably better tailored made for a reserve role, but again, I think he can be an impactful third guard. Yeah,
no, I think that's basically where you want him. You want him to be your third guard. I have Malachi Richardson here. How much time do we want to spend?
I mean, I have him here too. I don't feel great about it. He's on the fringe as far as that goes. I mean, he makes shots in summer league, and I've just never bought.
Does he?
I mean, he made some when I watched him, but I only watched one game, so maybe he was missing all the rest of the shots. But that would not surprise me at all, because some people, I don't know a lot of people that are high on him, but some people still buy him. I've just never been sold on the basketball IQ, and yeah, this is a tough sell for me.
Yeah, he turns 23 in January. Hasn't really shown anything yet. Like, let's just kind of like his option should be declined. He might end up being a camp cut. Wouldn't be out of the question. I understand why you would like the tools. He's 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan and fluid athletically, can kind of do some things. I am skeptical of that coming together for many of the reasons Cole just said. He's also, like, to me, he's not a good enough shooter. Like he's just never shown the ability over long periods of time. He got really hot in the NCAA tournament, and that's how he became a first-round pick. But he's never over long periods of time shown the ability to consistently knock down shots.
Yeah, I mean, 29.4% for his career, 30% from three last year. That's not going to cut it for a guy who basically is only a shooter on the floor. That's how he's adding his value. He's not creating for others. He's not defending anybody. It's just another one of those kind of size, speed, length, measurable guys who shoots okay in college that people take a dice roll on as far as their physical tools. They just don't really have the feel, the overall skill set to really support it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's, I think, all we got. Do we want to talk about anyone else?
I'm good. I mean, Van Fleet just got on his second contract. He's 24, so he doesn't follow them the compass here as far as what we're talking about. But, I mean, obviously that was a great pick. But other than that, I mean, the rest of these guys I think we've covered pretty expansively.
We love Freddie basketball. We do. Freddie basketball friendly podcast. He is one of my favorite basketball players in the NBA. He does not fall within the parameters of this podcast, but I just want to point out, as much as I can, genuinely just the best person.
And despite the fact he doesn't follow within the parameters of the podcast, just out of respect for what he's accomplished, he definitely deserves to be mentioned, because that was a great move by Masai, and Van Fleet's definitely taken full advantage. One of the best, if not the best, backup point guard in basketball.
Yeah, like I had Van Vliet as a top 50 player in that draft class and thought like I was like on it. He is so far exceeded everything that I was hoping for. And I was thinking he would stick in the NBA for a while, but man, he's a monster. I love him.
Definitely.
Cole, tell the people after 2 hours where they can find your work. I feel like people have forgotten.
If they have, you can check out thestepin.com. Again, we created a donut button. Oh, donate donut button. Good God, you can tell it's been 2 hours.
Go buy donuts.
Go buy donuts. I'm not a huge donut guy, but if you want to donate.
We need to talk about that. You live in the Pacific Northwest, and you're not a big donut guy?
Somehow, no. Never been. I mean, I'll eat them, but I'm not like crazy about it.
Interesting. Very... very bold take. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's that time of year, man. I mean, they're playing Sonics basketball on NBA TV, so I'm a little I'm a little frazzled right now. But overall, again, check out the Step-In on the donut.
Again,
the donate app. I'm done. Donate tab. Continue to listen to this podcast, and good God, we'll probably be back, I'm guessing, next week, because Sam has a busy rest of the week, and hopefully I'll be recharged and actually be able to speak at that point in time. So, yeah, thanks as always.
This podcast will go up on Monday. What date will that be? It'll be Monday, July something. Whatever the Monday that is located, I think it'll be July 30th. It'll go
30th, up. Yes.
So please go to thestepien.com/donate to help out Cole. Their website is really good, and does great work, and you should really go try and help out people trying to make it independently. I think that is really important, and I think that it's also really important for you to go subscribe to The Athletic and keep me employed over there. It is a great website. We really have done a lot of great work over there. I've been writing a little bit more about the NBA here and there, some team building stuff. I wrote about Kevin Love last week. I don't know what else I've written about since last week because, it's the future and I don't really know. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.